Lennox Lewis versus Vitali Klitschko, the rematch. What would have happened? This is a question that has divided boxing fans ever since that night when the two of those fighters fought. And it's going to continue to divide boxing fans and cause arguments and controversy and what have you between boxing fans for many years to come. I'm just going to give my take on it and give you my rationale on who I think would have won a rematch. And in fact, a lot of people are still questioning what would have happened had the fight been allowed to go on and Vitali had not been stopped on cuts. What would have happened, right? And people are also talking about, obviously, the rematch. Now, Vitali obviously did very well in the first fight, but I personally believe that had there been a rematch, I think Lennox Lewis would have won the rematch, and he would have won it in the exact same way that he won the first fight, which is on cuts. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't win on cuts again. Because in the first fight, it's a fact. I know people try and, a lot of Klitschko fans get upset about this, but it's a fact. It's a fact that Lennox Lewis was not in great shape in the first fight. He was his career heaviest. He came in the ring at least 10 or 12 pounds over his normal fighting weight, over his best fighting weight, okay? His career heaviest. He had a year out of the ring. He was 37 or 38 years old. He'd taken the fight on 2 weeks' notice. He'd been training for Kurt Johnson, who's 6'2". Then he took on Vitali, who was 6'8" or 6'7.5" on 2 weeks' notice. I mean, his preparation could hardly have been worse for that particular opponent. So, there was a whole heap of things Lewis could have improved. And if you look throughout Lewis's career, he always did very well in rematches. Yeah, he always did very, very well in rematches. Now, it is true that Lennox Lewis promised Vitali a rematch and he did not give him the rematch. He lied. Yeah, he ran away. He didn't give him the rematch that he promised him. And that forever will haunt Lennox Lewis because people are always saying that he ducked the rematch with Vitali, this, that, and the other. And that's fair enough. That is a fair criticism of Lennox Lewis because he did promise the rematch. But the thing is, again, if you look at Lennox Lewis's career and you look at the guys who gave him tough fights, he never rematched any of them. Yeah? You look at Ray Mercer, who gave him, in my opinion, an even tougher fight than Vitali did. He wouldn't give Ray Mercer a rematch. Lennox Lewis only gives you a rematch if you beat him. Yeah, that's how Lewis was. Now, the first Vitali fight, Lewis beat Vitali fair and square. It's not like the Carl Froch, George Groves thing where there was controversy and a bad refereeing and stuff like that. It wasn't any of that. Lewis beat Vitali fair and square on cuts. Yeah, you can't argue about the stoppage. Vitali's eyelid was nearly coming off. They had to stop the fight. They had to. I know Vitali's upset, this, that, and the other. That was one of the worst cuts I've seen in boxing. He was cutting his mouth, he was cutting his cheek, and he had a terrible gash on his eyelid. They had to stop the fight. There's no way that could have gone on. Yeah, so the win by Lewis was fair and square. There was nothing controversial about it in the slightest. The problem is that it was a very competitive fight. Yes, Vitali was ahead, but, it's a 12-round fight, not a 6-round fight. Lewis was also behind on points against Shannon Briggs early on in the fight. He was behind on points against Frank Bruno, and he managed to pull those fights out of the bag. So it's nothing unusual for Lewis to be behind in a fight. He can still come back and win the fight. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying Lewis would have won the fight had it gone on. Yeah, I don't know what would have happened. I personally think he probably would have won it, but I can't say that as a fact because it didn't happen. Same with the rematch. I can't sit here and tell you as a fact Lewis would have won the rematch. That's bullshit. Anyone who tells you that this definitely would have happened in the rematch, Vitali definitely would have won or Lewis definitely would have done this, they're just lying. They're just talking bullshit. All right? No one can say for sure, for certain, what would have happened in the rematch. All of us is just speculation. All of our opinions are just pure speculation. And my speculation is based on what I've seen in Lewis's career. And in a rematch, I don't see what Vitali could really change. Vitali was in much better shape than Lewis in the first fight. He was around his normal fighting weight. Vitali had actually been in training for another fight, which is why he was happy to jump in and replace Kirk Johnson. He'd been in training. He was in very good shape. He was young. He was in his 20s. And he had been studying Lewis for years before the first Lewis fight. That's why he said, because they asked him, are you not a bit wary about jumping in on 2 weeks' notice against Lennox Lewis? He said, no, not at all. I've been studying Lewis for years. I know all his moves. I knew one day I would fight him. I've been studying this guy. And I've also been in training for another fight. So I'm in good shape. I'm ready to go. I know exactly how to fight Lennox Lewis. I've been studying him for years. Whereas Lewis was in the worst shape of his career. He was coming off a year layoff. He was 37 or 38 years old. He had one eye on retirement because he said after the Tyson fight, he's only got 2 more fights and he's retiring. All right, he said he was going to have a rematch with Tyson, take on the 2 Klitschkos and retire. So and even then, he took a year off after the Tyson fight because he wasn't even sure if he was going to fight on. All right, so Lewis was in the worst shape of his career. He didn't take Vitali Klitschko seriously because you don't take on a guy who's 6'8" when you've been training for a guy that's 6'2", when you're 37, 38 years old in the worst shape of your career, unless you think it's going to be an easy fight. He took the Vitali fight. He even said before the fight, I remember interviews where he was talking about taking on Vitali at 2 weeks' notice before the fight had taken place. And he was saying, well, I think it's going to be like the Andrew Golota fight. Lewis did not have a very high opinion, and neither did many people in boxing. He didn't have a very high opinion of Eastern European fighters, especially not Eastern European heavyweights. So, he didn't think that it was going to be a taxing, fight. And that's why he was willing to take it on such short notice. Yeah. But in a rematch, all right, if a rematch had taken place, Lewis would have come in lighter. He's always better in rematches. We've seen that throughout his career. Even in the amateurs, he was better in rematches. We saw that throughout his career. And I think it would have come in lighter, faster. I'm not saying it would have been easy. But one thing we know that could not change in a rematch is Vitali Klitschko's skin. Yeah, he would have been carrying scar tissue in from the first fight, which is very bad scar tissue. He had 70 stitches in his face or more and a bunch of plastic surgery. He would have been coming in with that scar tissue, right? As soon as Lewis starts, and Lewis would have been faster in the rematch. As soon as he starts landing on Vitali's face, them cuts are going to open up again. And I think personally, the same thing would have happened again. Lewis would have won on cuts, just as the first fight. So, yeah, that's just my opinion. Everyone's got a different opinion. Again, it's all speculation. None of our opinions are more valid than anyone else's. So, yeah, drop your comments below. I know this is going to cause a ton of controversy. I know a lot of people are going to be upset about it, but everything I've spoken in this video is a fact in terms of saying that Lewis was out of shape, worst, shape of his life, highest weight of his life and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people are talking about the fact that in the first about the fact that Lewis, before the Vitali fight, him and Manny Stewart were saying Lewis is in great shape. Who the hell goes into a fight saying they're in terrible shape? No one admits they're in bad shape before the fight. You don't do that. You're going to give your opponent a psychological edge. You don't want to let them know you're in bad shape. So obviously, you come out and lie and say, oh, we're in great shape and all that kind of stuff. But the scales don't lie. The scales had him coming in way too heavy. In Lewis's best performances, even against big, tall opponents, he comes in around between 243 to around 245 pounds. Yeah, that's Lewis's weight that he comes in at. But against Vitali, he was way over 250 pounds, way over his normal fighting weight. Right? But yeah, he lied and said, oh yeah, I'm in great shape, this and that. Even Vitali said Lewis wasn't in great shape. He said he was very heavy. He wasn't in good condition. That's what Vitali himself said in the post-fight interview. And if you go back and look at the first Hassan-Rahman fight, when Lewis fought Rahman, he did the same thing. It was clear Lewis wasn't in shape. It's clear that he didn't arrive in South Africa soon enough. He didn't acclimatize himself to the altitude. But he came on saying, oh, no, don't worry about the fact I was filming Ocean's 11 with Vladimir Klitschko a couple of weeks ago. I'm perfectly acclimatized. I'm in great shape. Don't worry about my weight. Because again, in the Hassan-Rahman, in the first fight, Lewis was his career heaviest, I believe, in that fight, for that particular fight, right? He was his career heaviest, but he was saying, oh, no, I'm in great shape. Him and Manny Stewart were both saying the same thing. Oh, we're in great shape. We don't need to acclimatize. We've acclimatized just fine. 2 weeks is fine, blah, 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 or 7 days or whatever it was. All right? So Lewis lied. And then you saw in the rematch with Rahman, he came in a lot lighter. He was a lot sharper. You get what I'm saying? So he lied in the first fight because they don't want to give the opponent a psychological advantage. And that's exactly what they did in the first Vitali fight, man. They lied. They said they were in great shape, but the scales don't lie. Obviously, he wasn't in great shape. He was 37, 38 years old. Worst condition of his career. Coming off a 1 year layoff. Took the fight with a 6'8" opponent at 2 weeks' notice when he'd been training for a 6'2" opponent. A fat 6'2" opponent in Kurt Johnson. So it is what it is. Those are all facts. You can cry about it all you want, but it's the truth. But again, as I say, I'm not sitting here telling you that Lewis definitely would have knocked out Vitali in a rematch or stopped him or whatever. It's just my opinion based on what I've seen in Lewis's career and what I've seen of Vitali's career, and the fact Vitali has, not the strongest skin in the world. So yeah, that's what I would have picked, man. If the rematch had happened, I would have picked Lewis on cuts again. So drop your comments below. This is Hatman. I'm out.